Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros MLB. This is the Fantasy Baseball Podcast. It's me, Joey P. Joe Pisapia. With me today, my best friend, Joe Orrico. Welsh is still recovering from his illness, but Joe Orrico and I are here on our Twitch live. You can also watch on YouTube on demand, of course. But we're going to be doing a lot of stuff here on Twitch live, so make sure you go to twitch.tv/fantasypros and you subscribe today so you could be a part of all the live madness, because that's where leading off is going to be. Live to start the season. We're going to be live on YouTube too on Wednesday afternoons, taking your questions. So don't worry, we're not leaving there. Everything is going to be great. And today we're going to talk about hate. Why? Because, the internet sometimes, Joe, it's such a loving, nurturing, tender place. So we thought we'd kind of change it up from what the internet is normally, especially social media and things like that. Instead, we talk about some players, not that we hate, but the projections hate. So let's talk about this, because you and Welsh did a show recently about the players' projections love. Obviously, people who might have some big breakout seasons, but we're going to flip the script today. So, Joe, take us behind the mindset of this program today that you and I are going to run through with these players.
Well, first, I hope the people are going to be all right dealing with some hate on the internet. I know this is such an anomaly, but we're going to try and get through it. So, what I've done today, what we're going to do today is take a look at 10 players that projections, we're using the word hate, but projections are lower on than the consensus, especially in terms of ADP. So, what I've done is I'm putting the ATC projections into an auction calculator. And the way that it works on Fangraphs is it'll show you ADP as well. So I'm picking out some players where the ADP is a lot lower than the projected auction value. And you're going to see once we get into it, I'll give you some comparisons in terms of guys who are close in terms of dollar range. Very different than what you're seeing in terms of ADP. So if you are a projections person, these are essentially the players you should be fading heading into 2025.
And for those of you who always complain, hey, there's not enough salary cap information stuff on the site, well, here you go. Here you go. We're talking about it right now. Some players you might want to think twice about, at least overbidding for. Maybe you want to pay cost, maybe slightly less, but overbidding, maybe you should think twice about it. One thing you should not think twice about is joining us Wednesday for Fantasy Fest, because that is going down this coming Wednesday. I can't believe it's going to be here, 3 p.m. Eastern on our YouTube channel, Fantasy Pros MLB. Subscribe today. We're trying to get to 25,000 before opening day. We can do it. It's a 4-hour live stream packed with bust breakouts, bold predictions, and we're going to help you crush all of your competition, embarrass your friends and relatives. That's what we're here to do. It's going to be me, Mayor, Welsh, The Worm, all the fun people, Joe Orrico, and some special guests too. Chris Towers, Frank Stample from CBS, Eric Cross, the prospect guru himself, Scott Pianowski, and many more. So tune in live, Fantasy Pros MLB YouTube channel, 3 p.m. Eastern. Ring the bell till it goes ding for notifications so you don't miss it. And of course, if you do, if you have to work for a living, it'll still live on our YouTube channel. But we'd love for you to join us for 4 hours of wall-to-wall baseball. All right, let's start here with the first player on our list, Joe Orrico. Let's start with Jarren Duran. Last year, Jarren Duran was the darling of this program, especially me. I hyped that guy so much, and even with my lofty expectations, Jarren Duran delivered. Scored over 110 runs, hit 20 homers, stole 30-plus bases, hit 285, yet something's telling you the projections might not be as kind to him in 2025.
Yeah, last year I was very interested in him as well. The price was still kind of deflated. It's not deflated this year. He's a second round pick in most rooms. If you're looking at the ATC projections, and it's a 12-team auction calculator that I'm using, Jarren Duran comes out as the 31st overall hitter. That's not even including pitchers. 31st overall hitter behind Manny Machado, behind Jazz Chisholm, behind Ketel Marte, Rafael Devers, a lot of players that are going a lot later in draft rooms than he is. I think part of it is that they're calling for some regression in terms of the batting average. ATC has him projected at 268 when he hit 285 last year. They're also calling for 3 fewer homers, a drop by 20 runs, 6 fewer ribbies, and 4 fewer stolen bases. So really across the board, ATC is calling for a bit of regression with Jarren Duran. I'm really not 100% sure what to make of it. I think that the projections are probably pretty fair, but he could also surpass them, especially in terms of batting average. He's hit 285 and 295 the last 2 seasons. I'm not sure why they would expect him to come down to the 260s, but ATC is throwing some cold water on the Jarren Duran love for sure.
Yeah, look, I'm still very much in on Jarren Duran. The ADP is definitely steep, but at the same time, I'm looking around the other outfielders that he's going near. Jackson Churio, Jarren Duran, I think, are very close. I think there's some value if you go like a round or so later, or a couple dollars later on guys like maybe the upside of O'Neal Cruz or Wyatt Langford. So I get that, but uh, I understand what you're saying. I'm not off Jarren Duran, but I don't want to overpay for him either. Let's go to another outfielder. This one's in Chicago, Seiya Suzuki. Now, this is another guy that I think still, ironically, is undervalued. He is the 86th player going off the board in the consensus ADP, which you can find, by the way, at FantasyPros.com. He's the 26th outfielder off the board, but he's still going ahead of guys like Luis Robert, which I do have a problem with because Robert's a guy that has shown you 30-20 kind of a season. Seiya Suzuki, I think, is still more of a 2015 guy, but he does give you batting average. What are you seeing in Seiya Suzuki's projections that have you a little concerned?
So I'm personally a very big fan of Seiya Suzuki. I think that he is a well-rounded contributor. He can give you 5 category production. I think the Cubs lineup is sneaky very good this year. But if you are looking at the ATC projections, he comes in as the 28th outfielder, behind Ian Happ, behind Taylor Ward, behind a lot of guys who are going well outside of the top 100 picks. And Seiya Suzuki is going right around pick 85. For another piece of context, he's projected as essentially the same value as Nick Castellanos, who's going about 85 picks later than he is. So I understand some of the skepticism with Seiya Suzuki, but it feels like they're a little bit low in the batting average. The last couple of years, he's been 283, 285. I see some systems in the 250s even. The bat has him at 257. We're focusing in on ATC at 263, but it just seems a little bit too conservative. They're essentially saying he's going to repeat what he did last year, and I guess that implies that he's going to miss some games as well because he played 132 last year. Projections are for 129, but it feels a little bit light. I think that Suzuki can probably hit 25 home runs if things break right with his barrel rate, hard hit rates, very good. I like him a lot more than the projections do.
Yeah, I don't think he's got the ceiling, like I said, of a Luis Robert or some other guys maybe in that same range, but the floor is so strong.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I think the projections here are being a little too negative. I also like the fact that Kyle Tucker's in this lineup too. And I think whenever you're adding talent to a lineup, you have to take that into account. It has a ripple effect. It does trickle down. Jelly Boy wants to know how old Suzuki is, watching us live on Twitch. Thanks, Jelly Boy. He is 30, so not that old. So he is still right in his prime. Good ballpark factor for the most part. We're talking about improved lineup this year too. If Matt Shaw comes along quickly, let's talk about these two outfielders again here, just for perspective. So I'm going to give you some names going in the same ADP. You tell me, despite the fact maybe the projections are being a little, bearish here, who you would want to take. So Churio or Jarren Duran?
I'm all in on Churio. For me, I would take Churio. It's not like a massive difference, but I love Churio this year.
Jarren Duran or Jazz Chisholm?
That one's Duran for me. I think the profile is a bit safer, especially with the batting average.
I agree. Here's one too. 5 months of Ronald Acuna or 6 theoretical months of Jarren Duran?
Oh, it's
See,
still
this
Jarren
is where
Duran.
the rubber meets the road here, because this is
Yeah.
about what kind of manager you are in fantasy. Do you want to roll the dice with the greatness of Acuna? We've seen him come back from the ACL tear before and come back and tear it up. No pun intended, or every pun intended. But seriously, like that is a tough one for me, because if you are the safety net kind of owner, then you are somebody that wants to have Jarren Duran most likely, as opposed to waiting for, and God forbid there's a setback for Ronald Acuna. What do you think here between those two guys? What kind of manager are you, Joe?
So I am generally a little more play it safe, but I also play in a lot of deeper leagues. I'm mostly playing 15-team mixed leagues, and you need a little bit of a higher floor there. I think the average viewer is probably more likely to be playing in a 10 or a 12-team league with IL spots. And in that case, Acuna is probably the guy you should be taking a chance on. But I also think that Durant really brings a lot of safety at the top of the Red Sox lineup that should be very good. It's a great ballpark to hit in. There aren't the injury concerns. I can see going both ways. For me personally, it's probably Durant because I know the injuries are going to find me throughout the season. I don't want to be
Right.
stockpiling them before the year starts. If Acuna has any kind of
Fair.
setback, that wouldn't be good. And also, the last time he returned from the ACL problem, the power was kind of zapped from him for at least that first year when he returned. So I'm not exactly sure what kind of player we're going to get. He's probably not going to run as much. You'd have to think that he's going to take it easy a little bit after both
Well,
of the
isn't that
ACLs.
the bill of goods we were sold last time, and then ran amok? Remember, it was
Yeah,
like, oh, he's not probably not going to run as much. And then he stole a million bases, but it was the power that actually lagged behind a little
Yeah.
bit, ironically, I guess, because of the timing more than anything, or maybe just the power of the legs, getting back under him. That to me was so surprising because I think what you're saying is correct. Most people would have thought, oh, the power will be there, but the stolen bases won't. And it was the inverse
Yeah.
last time he came back from this injury.
I just wonder now that it's been both legs that have now had an injury, a serious, significant injury,
Mhm.
if he's now going to say, okay, I can't run as much. And also, another thing about his running before is interesting. I believe it was before the rule changes. I believe so. That's another piece of a variable we have to factor into the equation that when he came back from the first injury, I think that was before the stolen base rules had changed. So maybe we can factor in a few extra steals from him just from that alone, that it's a little bit easier than it was 3 years ago. But he is a nerve-wracking pick in any league, whether it's a
Mhm.
deep league, a shallow league, best ball, whatever it is you're playing. You're taking on a lot of risk in the third round. I've seen some drafts where he's starting to get pushed down to the fourth a little bit. That's where I kind of like it. But there's also some rooms where he's in the second, and I think at that point it's a little bit too much of a risk. That's where Jarren Duran's going, and if it's a second round price on both of them, then I would have to go with Duran. I think.
The more shallow the league, the more I like Acuna.
Yeah,
Just easier to deal with. All right, let's go to Mike Wish's question here. I currently am drafting 12th in head-to-head points league with 2 picks to go. If Gunner's still available, do I grab him? Absolutely. I mean, in a
yeah,
head-to-head, he should not still be there. So good luck with that draft there. Let's get to another player here, Jordan Westburg. Now, Westburg is a guy that last year, 18 homers, 63 ribbies, stole 6 bases, hit 264. I don't want to say came out of nowhere, but he wasn't the guy that we were expecting to pop last year. We were looking for the holidays and the Kierstads, and Westberg is the one that we got that sort of broke out. Now, my concern with Westberg continues to be: what if Kobe Mayo hits the cover off the ball? What if Jackson Holiday, you know, finally lives up to the promise and him getting squeezed? Do the projections show anything about that possibility of Westberg maybe losing out on a little bit of playing time or at bats, or do you think Westberg is locked in no matter what, and they're just going to find a spot for him?
I think Westberg is pretty locked in. I don't think that he is somebody that you'd have to worry about losing unless he's hitting his weight. Then I think that he's probably pretty locked into the lineup. But the projections are a tad bit lower on him than I was maybe expecting, just based on ADP. He comes in as a $10 player in 12-team leagues, according to ATC. It's about the same value as Luis Ariz. I know it's a much different skill set overall, but if you're just
Mhm.
looking at pure value, they're projected about the same. Marcus Semien is projected as a little bit more valuable, and he's going 10 or 12 picks later in a lot of rooms. Luis Garcia, who's been our guy, Joe, all draft season, is projected within a dollar, and he's going about 40 picks later. So it's not that I don't like Westberg necessarily. It's just that I feel like I can kind of replicate his production down the board. And at the very least, I can replicate the value that I'm getting out of that draft pick.
Look, a show that's about hate, and we're getting some love. Love this format so far. Flawless transition from the planned content to the mailbag and back. That's what we do here. It's not Fantasy Pros by accident, Jelly Boy. We live this life, bro. This is what we do. Westberg, just so you know, I like to look back at minor league track record of Big U. Everybody knows that about me. And I always like to come back to double A numbers. And when you look at like 2022 double A, only 47 games, but he hit 247. There's a lower version of Jordan Westberg that does exist. And if you look at the minor league ups and downs, it's not impossible to think that the league makes adjustments to Westberg and he could struggle a little bit. So this is actually a guy that I'm fading in 2025 in a big way. Now, one guy I'm not fading, and I think projections are too light on him, is Mark Vientos of the New York Mets. And if you've been watching the shows for years, you know I'm the biggest self-loathing Met fan there is. It's always doom and gloom. It's always going to be the worst. I knew that they were not going to get to the World Series or win the World Series. I was just trying my best last year to enjoy the ride, and I did. But Vientos, to me, I don't understand how there's no universe to me where he stays healthy for 6 months and does not drive in 100 runs. It just doesn't exist with Lindor, with Juan Soto in that lineup now, getting on base ahead of him. I don't know if Pete Alonso is going to stick in that 3 hole. I got to be honest with you. I think Vientos in that 3 hole would be much better hitting Nimmo 4 and Alonso 5. I think that's probably the best version of the Mets lineup personally. But Joe, when you're digging deep into ATC and some of the other projection aggregates, what do you see about Vientos?
The batting average is kind of the big one at 242. Not that it would kill you necessarily, but it is a bit of a detriment. And I think the big concern there is the swing and miss. Like he had a 29% strikeout rate last year, close to 30, 29.7, and then a 16% swinging strike rate. He is a free swinger. And I think that's what worries some people. That might be what some of the modeling doesn't like. I agree with you that the power is completely legit. Like a 14% barrel is a crazy number. 47 on the hard hit is really, really good. I think that some people and the systems specifically are just a little bit worried about what the batting average floor could be. There are some systems that have him as a 230 hitter. When you're looking at just the straight dollar values compared to ADP, so he's the eighth third baseman by ADP, and he's 11th in terms of the projected dollar value. Alec Boehm is projected as a more valuable player. Jake Berger, Matt Chapman, Alex Bregman. These guys are all
Mhm.
going a lot later, and I don't think, Joe, you're not going to agree with a lot of those probably because you are a Vientos guy, and I get that. But if you are trying to replicate some of that value later on, you can wait a few rounds and you could take, I mean, any of these guys really that I mentioned: Bregman, Chapman, Berger, Boehm, and they're all projected as a slightly bit more valuable than Vientos at a much later cost.
Yeah, look, I get that. I don't think it's far off. I'm just gonna stay on the counter argument here, which is he's a career 277 hitter in the minor leagues. If he hits 260 again, I'll take that to the bank. I think he's got 30 plus homer power. I think he's going to drive in 100. I think he could score 100 too if things break right for this Mets offense. And I know Mets fans with expectations, it's a very dangerous game to play. But this is why I think lineups are so important. And we touched about this a little bit when in one of the last discussions we had with Suzuki. When you add Juan Soto to a lineup, it changes everything. And if you are going to hit him in the 3 hole, which again, I think is the smart thing to do, whether or not that's going to be out of the gate, we'll find out. But over time, I think it would be much wiser to flip flop those guys, stick Nimmo in the 4 spot. And if you do that, Vientos is going to be in a tremendous position where he's going to see a ton of fastballs this year. So where he hits in the lineup matters. Hitting the 5 spot, I think maybe some of these concerns come to fruition. If he ends up hitting in the 3 spot more often than not, I think he takes off like a rocket ship. Let's get to some more questions here too, because we've got some newbies here, which we love. Black Raptors here. I'm new to fantasy baseball. Well, welcome aboard. I've been watching you guys for the videos, and if I am later in the first round, would you go Skeens then Scooble, or would you guys rather go Skeens and then look for a Lindor so that you can get Zach Wheeler, Gilbert Crochet, et cetera, et cetera? Or would you wait on a pitcher? Now, it depends on the format you're playing in, Black Raptor. It depends if you are looking at, say, head-to-head points leagues where strikeouts are big money stuff and big points for wins. Then I'm looking for big-time pitchers, and then I would want one of those aces at the bottom for sure. I would still lean towards Scuba. I think he's a little safer, as much as Skeens is really interesting. If it's season long roto, I've been somebody you've seen it in the drafts. I tend to wait, and it's head to head. So there you go. So we see that. So even if it's head to head points or head to head categories, I'm a little more apt to go with a pitcher earlier. But I'm also okay with taking those 2 big hitters at the turn there and then coming around and settling for a Blake Snell to be my rotation head. I think the value there is still really good with some of the guys you're getting in the 3rd or 4th round. The problem is if you miss those guys in the top 15 hitters, it's really tough to make up ground. So I don't like it in most roto formats, even head to head ones. Joe, what are your thoughts on what Black Raptor's trying to figure out this year?
I think at the end of the first, I understand the temptation to go with one or the other, or hell, maybe even double down and go pocket aces if you're feeling adventurous. I can understand that there's some temptation there. But for me personally, you mentioned it, Joe. Like there are so many solid bats at the in the first round, specifically at the end of the first, beginning of the second. Like I think there's 17, 18, 19 first round worthy hitters this year.
Mhm.
And so if you're able to get a Vlad and Lindor combo at the end of the first, or Vlad and Carroll, or Jordan Alvarez and Mookie Betts, like if you can get 2 of those lockdown hitters, that's generally the way I like to go about it. And then you've alluded to some of these pitchers that are still going to be on the board a little bit later on. Logan Gilbert, Garrett Crochet, Zach Wheeler. Those guys, especially in a 12-team league, could still be sitting there in the third. Wheeler, maybe not. Gilbert and Crochet almost certainly will be sitting there in the third round. And I think that
Mhm.
Crochet, if you're talking about his value compared to Skeens and Scooble, it's about the same for me. There's not a huge gap there, really. So if you can still take an elite superstar ace level pitcher while locking down 2 of those cornerstone hitters in your lineup, that's the way I generally like to go about it.
Look, I think you take the 2 big hitters and come back around and get a Pablo Lopez and a Snell, or maybe a Dylan Cease and a Snell. If things really break right for you. And to me, that is, I think, the better balance of a roster. But it's a great question. And this is look,
Yeah.
we're here for the OGs, we're here for the newbies, we're here for everybody. Let's take another question here since we're on questions, and we'll get back to some of the players' projections. Hate. This is from Bova Knight, friend of the show. Hey guys, in a dynasty startup slow draft right now, 10 teams with custom scoring that favors offense. I think and power. I'm thinking offense, right? That's where we're going. Okay. I have started Witt, Churio, and Acuna Man, that is a pretty fantastic dynasty, even for 10 teams. Start. Can you give me a guy that you're reaching for in general in this sort of format, giving it's a dynasty startup? Well, I like what you're doing here, Bobo, which is you are focusing on offense first and building a dynasty team around young position players, because that to me is what you want to do. Pitching can be very volatile. Pitching also turns over faster than anything else. So that is, I think, important. Where would you go next? You want to try to reach for a guy like Crochet based on his age and now that he's with the Boston Red Sox? Are you still going to pound the hitting table a little bit more? Is there somebody you're reaching for, Joe, in Dynasty around that fourth round? Is it a Junior Caminero, let's say, or someone like that?
You definitely could. You can continue to fill out the offense, and I think that's probably the wise thing to do in a 10-team league. The pitchers, you're still going to have such great pitchers available in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and you can take 6 hitters to start your draft off. Um, but I also don't really hate going after one of those lockdown aces that are still in their 20s, like Garrett Crochet. This channel, me, Welsh, all of us have loved Garrett Crochet throughout the draft season. I wouldn't mind going with him there. He's still so young. He's in a great spot in Boston. The ballpark isn't my favorite thing, but his talent is just brilliant. Like Garrett Crochet, there's a world where Garrett Crochet is the number one pitcher this season in all of baseball and wins the Cy Young. I wouldn't even be a little bit surprised by it. So if you're
No.
taking him in the fourth round and then you're backfilling some of the bats later as well, I get the pitching is more volatile in Dynasty, but you have such an elite base of 5 category guys with Witt, Churio, and Acuna. I wouldn't mind if you wanted to pivot off and start going to some pitching now as well.
We've seen some pitchers have some success in Fenway Park. Pedro Martinez was pretty good. Roger Clemens pretty good. It can be done, folks. It can be done. And Crochet looks like quite the strikeout artist, dropping what he had 6 Ks the other day in 3 innings, or 7, I think it was,
Yeah.
in the spring training. It's only spring training, but I think the best giveaway this year, Joe, would be a crocheted Garrett Crochet. I would
Oh
like
my
to give
god.
that away.
A
We got to work on
crochet
that.
jersey?
Yeah. No, not even just the jersey, like a little, like, like how we have little Derek, like little Derek Brown, like a little stuffed animal, like kind of like this kind of thing right
Get a
here.
tea cozy
I,
made?
I like when little Derek makes appearances on the baseball show. It's fun. All right, let's get to the next player on our list. And it also brings us to our Microsoft Chasing Challengers segment, which is brought to you by Microsoft. Just like the athletes who push boundaries and redefine what's possible in business, those decision makers today are turning challenges into opportunities, and Microsoft meets you where you are with tools and guidance to help make you the impactful person using safe, secure AI solutions. And whatever challenges you're facing, Microsoft empowers you with the expertise to say, bring it on. And in this segment, we're going to spotlight Anthony Volpe, who is a can't miss, quote unquote, prospect who's frankly been missing a lot of balls lately in the first 2 years of his major league career. It's a pivotal year, I think, for Anthony Volpe because we're constantly in win now mode if we're the New York Yankees. And let's be honest, Volpe so far has not produced, I think, up to what the expectations were. I think that is always a problem. Expectations are high. It's New York. Prospects sometimes get overrated. Now, I've seen Volpe play in person a bunch. He's a very good player. I think he was rushed a little bit to the big leagues, to be honest, and I think he continues to press there. But if he doesn't produce this year, I would not be shocked if the Yankees start looking for a little competition and maybe somebody else to fill that role at shortstop. And Volpe has power, he's got speed, he's a solid defender, but too much swing and miss. That's been his problem. Spot in the batting order is a problem too. He's always hitting lower in the lineup. That's not great. He's a good defender, too much swing and miss. That's the big challenge heading into 2025. Hopefully, what Anthony Volpe can do is go back to some of the minor league tape and see what are the things I was doing there that gave me success, that made me a better contact hitter that I'm not doing at this major league level. Is he trying to hit too many home runs? Is he trying to press a little bit too much? But Anthony Volpe, I think, is at a crossroads this year, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to him in 2025. And that's this week's Chasing Challengers. Remember, Microsoft AI solutions empower you to take bold steps and new ideas to help drive your business forward. With Microsoft as your trusted partner, you can navigate your journey with confidence, finding innovative solutions and reaching new possibilities. Visit Microsoft.com/challengers to learn more. What's your take on Anthony Volpe this year?
So the main thing is the batting order spot. I think I've heard it said by some people that, well, they're probably going to put him back in the leadoff spot. He's still a young guy, blah, blah, blah. He's got speed. His on base percentage is atrocious. Last year, it was 293. The year before, it was 283. The Yankees moved him down from the leadoff spot because he was somebody that was leading off. I believe, I'm just going to pull it up, but I believe it was June or July. when they dropped him. It was July the 3rd when they removed him from the leadoff spot, and he never returned there for the rest of the season, batting in the 7th through 9th spot. That's a concern. If he's batting 7 through 9, there's not a lot of value there. If you're looking at the straight projections, so first I'll start with the ADP. He's the 14th shortstop by ADP, and if you look at the dollar value projections, he's 20th. So a lot of that comes from the low batting average, 237 projected batting average, 14 home runs. If he's batting at the bottom of the order, then the counting stats probably aren't going to be great. He's projected for just 60 RBI. He kind of took a step back last season. The barrel rate, which is something I look at a lot, I reference it all the time on the show. He went from 9% in his rookie year, which is really a good number, to 3.9%. The launch angle fell from 14 to 8. The hard hit rate went down. The home runs went from 21 to 12. It was just a bad season for Anthony Volpe. He kind of needs to prove it to me at this point that he can be a starting caliber shortstop in even a 15-team roto league. At this point, I think he's like a middle infield option for the most part, maybe even a bench option at some point. But he's somebody, like, I've done a couple videos, short forms and different podcasts on this channel where I've talked about fading him. And that's my stance heading into this year, that Volpe is somebody that's just too rich for my blood.
Yeah, look, I would buy him low in dynasty leagues just
Yeah.
because the principle of buying low on once upon a time very highly rated prospects, it's always a good practice. Typically, it tends to work out for you when you buy him low. But in redraft, I got a problem with. I'm with you. I'm not liking it. Wonky Penguins entered the chat. I like Crochet better if Mayer didn't love him. Well, Mayer's a big Red Sox guy, so that's what happens. I don't know how the guy who's an Eagles fan is also a Red Sox fan. I'm not sure how that got crossed up. But then again, I'm a Patriots fan and a Mets fan, which is nice because I've had cycles of joy and utter disillusion, and it just goes in a circle for about 20 years where I just felt awful pain, and then August came and training camp, and then Super Bowls, and life is great, and then spring training happens, and then by June, the Mets were out of it. Also here, Bova has some of the names that they were looking at: Caminero, Gilbert, Langford, Strider, Merrill, and Sasaki. I got to tell you, Caminero's the one that sticks out for me. I think Joe's going to say Gilbert, but I don't want to speak for you.
No, the one that sticks out for me is actually Langford. I think Langford
really over Caminero. Okay.
I am Langford over Caminero. I think, yeah. The lineup, I think, is better in Texas going forward. I think it's projectable that they're going to be fairly close, but Langford also brings you speed that Caminero doesn't really have. Caminero might have a little bit more power, but I think it's relatively close. But I am more. I had a keeper question actually just this morning between the two of them, and I told the guy Langford. So that's my stance. But I don't think it's like an obvious answer either.
Jelly wants to know, is ATC your preferred projection system? Well, ATC, and it's Ariel Cohn, friend of ours here over at Fantasy Pros. It's an aggregate system, right? It takes all the projections and kind of gives you the average of the projections. So that's a great way, instead of beating around and trying to look at a million different projections, you can actually just look at ATC and kind of get the bigger picture. So in that sense, yeah, it's pretty good. Actually, we just did a mock draft show over on his pod. I was over there doing a little mock draft action. Catch out that podcast. It was a good time. All right, let's get to some more players here. Let's get to some pitchers here that the projections hate. I'll start with Corbin Burnes. New digs for him. Arizona, that's where he wanted to be. Now, the Arizona Diamondbacks scored a ton of runs last year. In terms of ballpark environment, I mean, I don't know if you want to call it a push. I'm not sure where your head's at. But, Joe, Corbin Burnes started off really well. The second half wasn't quite as good as the first half, but Corbin Burnes has been a very steady pitcher for a while. However, I would say he's not a guy that, if you dial back to 3 years ago, has been quite as dominant. Maybe those numbers were unsustainable. What are the projections telling you about him in 2025?
Yeah, Corbin Burnes was brilliant, and I think he's still a really good pitcher, but I think he's just a little bit pricey, and I think the projections tend to agree on that. By ADP, he is the 9th pitcher off the board, and Emmanuel Clase is ahead of him. So that's actually the 8th starting pitcher. Let me just sort by starting pitcher. So the 8th starting pitcher by ADP, and in terms of the dollar value, projected 13th. He's projected below Logan Webb, below Yamamoto, below Snell, Framber Valdez. I think a lot of it comes down to the 3.55 projected ERA and the fact that he's not projected for a strikeout per inning. Corbin Burnes, at times in his career, has been a 35% strikeout rate guy. He had 243 strikeouts in 2022. Last season, in 194 innings, he just had 181. And if you look progressively every year, from 35% to 30 to 25 to 23, he's lost ticks on the strikeout rate every single year. The FIPs are still very good, but they're not what they were in 21 and 22. They're in the mid threes when he was in the mid twos. I think that the ballpark is interesting. It's not a terribly hitter-friendly park. It actually is pretty bad for left-handed power. So I don't think the park is a big thing for me, really. It's just that I don't know what I'm getting in terms of strikeouts and ERA from Corbin Burnes. It might be in that 3.6, 3.7 range. And if I'm taking a starter in the third round as my ace, that's a little bit dicey for me. If he's not even going to give me a strikeout per inning, I think that's a little bit of a little bit too much for me to stomach in the third round.
I agree. I would rather have Crochet, Sale, Reagan, Cease, probably Snell all over Burns, to be honest with you. I love Snell this year with the Dodgers. I think he is the safest guy. That team's going to win 100 games just by accident. So that's the way I'd go. Also, some fun things in the chat. Wonky Penguin is a Cubs Vikings fan because her dad thought that overcoming difficult challenges was an important part of her childhood. It's built character for you, Wonky Penguin. Here's another one. Tyler, I'm a Blue Jays and Argonauts fan. Does that
Oh
count?
God, Argonauts. This might be the first CFL reference ever on the Fantasy Pros Baseball podcast. It
I
might
thought
be.
that would make you happy. You know, you're a good red-blooded Canadian there.
One of the only teams that's won a championship in Toronto in the last 20 or 30 years. So I
Here's
like them
one
a bit.
from Sir Trey. Hey guys, fun watching you on Twitch. I'm trying to decide my keepers 10-team head-to-head categories. I have to drop 2: Otani, Caminero, Churio, Cruz, Diaz, and Tanner Scott. To drop 2, this is easy. It's going to be Diaz for me and Scott. I mean, that's it. Closers are replaceable. This is the easiest question we're going to have all year, Joe, right? You got anything to add there?
Tanner Scott, I think he'll probably get the majority of the saves, but that's a pretty strong pen out in Los Angeles. He might get 17 saves this year or something like that. It could be 28, but
some managers don't like using lefties in save situations. I like to save them for that big spot. Like, I'm just saying it's historically something that managers do. Not everybody's Billy Wagner necessarily, but I'm telling you right now, just watch. It might be more complicated than you think. That's a no-brainer. Those are 2 easy drops. You're going to crush. It's a great team. Let's do another pitcher here. Hunter Brown, awful April. But man, after that, awfully good. Now, I understand, we have to bake into some of the bad Hunter Brown in the projections, but I want to be more optimistic when it comes to Hunter Brown. Why are some of the projections looking pessimistic?
So the thing that stands out from the projections, he has a top 100 ADP, but he is as the 41st starting pitcher in terms of ADP. That's a little bit high, I think, just based on the projected WHIP at 125, the projected ERA at 3.75. Like if he's giving you a 125 WHIP over 170 innings, it's not great. It's not really helping you. A high threes ERA. A lot of the time, especially in a deeper league, Brown is going to be your SP3. Maybe if you're really pushing it, he could be your SP2. I just think that there's a lot of risk there. Like Houston's still a good team, but they're not quite as good as they were. I think losing Kyle Tucker and Bregman is a big loss. Replacing them with Walker and Paredes definitely helps, but are they going to be quite as good? Probably not. I think you can maybe shave a win or two off of Brown's projections. And I think that ERA is probably going to be somewhere in like the mid to high threes. So I don't know. I think he's a good source of strikeouts, but he's kind of just not somebody that knocks my socks off this season. I've drafted him once or twice, but I don't know. I think you can do better in that top 100 ADP range.
I still like Hunter Brown. I think he was so good down the stretch. I'm just buying. I'm going to buy into Hunter Brown. The team will still be very competitive. I think losing Tucker and Bregman takes a big hit there for Houston, and I don't know if Paredes is enough to take that back. But look at some of the pitchers going in that same range. Grayson Rodriguez, I would take over him. Roki Sasaki and Hunter Brown are very close to me, but Zach Gallen I would take over either. Do you agree or disagree?
Grayson's a little dicey right now with this whole lat situation. I'm not sure what to make of
Lats and obliques. That's all
Grayson.
spring training's about, Joe. Lats and obliques.
Who are the other guys that you said besides him?
The other guys in the similar ADP: Freddie Peralta, Grayson Rodriguez, Roki Sasaki, Hunter Brown, Zach Gallen. That's your grouping.
I think I'm personally taking all of them over Brown. I think maybe not Sasaki because Sasaki's going to get on the hype train with these crazy splitters I'm seeing on the timeline, and his price is going to shoot up. I think I'm taking most of them over Brown. I think I'm more of a fade on Brown this year. I'm coming to realize.
Yeah, I can understand. All right, let's get to another pitcher here. Hunter Greene, massive strikeout potential, could certainly lead the National League in strikeouts. I think even with Paul Skeens being there, and Hunter Greene starting to get the home runs under control, starting to figure things out. It's kind of been a slow road for him, and it feels like Hunter Greene is, I think in 2024, when you look back, really putting the pieces together. not just trying to throw the ball, but really trying to pitch a little bit more and starting to, I think, find the outs and lineups, do the things that better pitchers do instead of just trying to blow everybody away and strike out everybody. However, the strikeout totals are extremely high, and that is something we look for in fantasy. But when you're digging into the numbers and projections for 2025, what did you see about Hunter Greene?
Well, we got Hunter Brown, Hunter Green, and then up next, Hunter Blue on our projection. So when I'm taking a look at his
Sounds like a
numbers,
Reservoir Dogs kind of thing situation
yeah,
here.
it does. Steve Buscemi's going to walk through the door any minute.
Why
But
am I Mr. Pink?
so the thing with Hunter Greene, I think, is the ballpark a lot of the time that scares people. It scares me a little bit. If you are starting him in Cincinnati, you never really know what's going to happen. He has historically had a bit of a home run problem last year that seemed to be curbed a little bit, but I'm not really sure what the real version of him is. Like his first 2 years, homer to fly ball, 16%, 14%. Those are well above league average. And then last year he went down to 7%, which is below league average. So is he somewhere in the middle there? Probably you can split the difference. But I think you can also split the difference on a lot of the numbers from 23 to 24. Like, is he a 4.82 ERA? No. But is he a 2.75 ERA in that ballpark with his command? I don't know, honestly. Like the whip went from 142 to 102. Like the way I'm approaching Hunter, I was about to say Hunter Brown. The way I'm approaching Hunter
Yep.
Greene this year is I'm kind of splitting the difference from his 23 to 24 stats, which seems kind of what the projections are doing. If he's giving you what ATC's calling for, which is a 3.9 ERA and a 1.17 whip, you can live with it. But as a top 100 pick, I don't know that you're going to love it. Like he is projected in the same value range as Chris Sanchez, who's going about 100 picks later or about 80, 90 picks later. Same as Gosman, same as Rodon, Nate Eovaldi. These guys are all projected right around the same dollar value. Eflin, Rodriguez, Gallen, Reynaldo Lopez. All these guys are projected right in the same range. And I think without having to worry about Great American Ballpark, they might be a little bit safer.
There's no way I'm taking Ronaldo Lopez over Hunter Greene. I'm just not doing
That's
it.
fair.
I get it. It was a good year last year for Lopez converting. I get it. It was solid. It was the story that kept on going to. We were waiting for it to end. It did not. I'm not saying Lopez can't be good, but I want the upside of Hunter Greene and that strikeout potential. So there's an opportunity with some of the guys we're talking about. Maybe the projections don't like where some of the sharper people in your leagues might start to fade away from some of these people. If people are fading away from Hunter Greene, I'm taking him and I'm taking that strikeout upside along with it. Now, he's only made 26 starts. That's the career high last year. That also has to enter into your psyche when you're evaluating players. But at his age right now, he's going to be turning 25. Look, I'm in on Hunter Greene. I love the upside. And I think that Cincinnati Reds team will be very good, very athletic team there. You're going to have a lot of positives. If Lodolo and Singer pitch well, they're going to compete for that division. They're definitely going to compete. Two more pitchers to talk about here. Let's go to Jared Jones. Now, we had Nick Pollock on the show. If you missed it, go watch on our YouTube channel. Jared Jones, one of the guys that he absolutely loves. He had a red hot start to the season, kind of the inverse of Hunter Brown. And then, of course, some injuries happened and the rest was history. So kind of an incomplete downward spiral there for Jared Jones in the second half. But it's a new year. Yes, it is. So where are we going with Jared Jones this year with the projections, Joe?
So he's kind of a hard eval just because of how things fell off for him in the second half of the season, like you alluded to. First half was a 3.56 ERA. Second half, he did miss a big chunk of time as well, but 5.87 ERA in the second half. He was getting crushed. And I think the projections are kind of looking into that. There's also not a ton of data because he's only pitched the one season. When there is not as much to look back on, projections do have a bit of a harder time. But he is projected as the number 60 starting pitcher with a $5 value. Maybe I call it a $6 value in 12-team leagues, behind Robbie Ray, behind Ranger Suarez, behind your guy Seth Lugo, Sandy Alcantara, Taj Bradley. These guys are all going well after him in drafts, and they're all projected right around the same range. I think that there is some concern. The team stinks. Like the team, the front office in Pittsburgh, I don't know what they've done here. You got a healthy
Yep.
Paul Skeens. You have an ostensibly healthy Jared Jones right now. Your window to compete is open. Tommy Pham can't.
And the division's weak.
Position.
It's not a strong division either. There's no way if you added a big batter to this offseason, but they didn't do it. Why they don't go to a team like the Orioles as a glut of position player prospects, I keep saying this, and make a deal with them, I don't understand. If you've got all these pitching prospects, there's only 5 spots in the rotation. Trade one of these guys. The Orioles are desperate for pitching. Their average age of pitcher is what now? Between Charlie Morton and Sagano and those. I mean, it is not young. I don't understand what they're thinking there, Joe.
And if you look at the Pirates lineup, they have a 37-year-old Tommy Pham projected to lead off and a 38-year-old Andrew McCutchen going to be cleaning up for them. It's a problem. Like that
It's a
is a
huge problem.
problematic offense. If Jared Jones won 7 games this year or 8 games this year, I don't think anybody should be surprised by that. The projected numbers are pretty good, but at the same time, a 3.94 ERA, a 122 WHIP, about a strikeout per inning, it's fine. But if I can get the same value in Robbie Ray, Lugo, Alcantara, Nestor Cortez, Ryan Pepio, all these guys who are going later that have better projections, I just don't really see the need to take a risky shot on Jared Jones. I still like him, like dynasty leagues. I'd still be buying into him, but I think there's a lot of risk in 2025.
Last guy on the list, Shane Baz of the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, look, Baz is a young pitcher with a lot of upside. Problem is, and Pollock and I were talking about this on the last show, on the number 2 pitching guide. We were talking about Littell having no options left, and that could hurt Baz or Pepio potentially in this rotation. I know Eno on the show that you guys did was talking about, Ryan Pepio very glowingly. So, is Shane Baz looking at a situation where he could be a little, maybe he's the odd man out of this rotation, at least to start?
Oh man, I hope not. That would be devastating because as much as I think the projections are down on Shane Baz, I still really like him. I think that he is now finally in a situation where he's healthy. He should have a chance. Like the rotation should be McClanahan, Bradley, Pepio, probably Boz and Rasmussen, and then I guess the Littell question is, I don't know, maybe they make him a long reliever or something like that, or maybe Rasmussen stays in the pen because he's not terribly stretched out at the moment. There are some questions, I guess, as to how they're going to assemble the rotation, but I don't think Shane Baz should be in jeopardy. That being said, the projections are not great on him. 138 innings, which is not great in terms of volume, a 4.05 ERA, a 124 WHIP, and fewer than strikeout per inning. The strikeouts, I think, are misprojected there. I think that he is somebody that was working his way back from a major surgery. The strikeout rate wasn't what it was pre-surgery, but over the 14 starts, he still had very good results. He had a 3.06 ERA and a 1.06 WHIP. I think the strikeouts will come back. This is a guy who had a 36% strikeout rate in his first touch of Major League Baseball. And then the next year, it was 26%. Like the strikeouts are legit. The stuff is very, very legit with Shane Baz. I think that this is a year where he can defy the projections, but I think we have to at least give them some, we have to at least acknowledge them, especially considering the ballpark downgrade in terms of the pitchers that are going to be headed there to essentially what is Yankee Stadium, hot Yankee Stadium. Out in Tampa.
I like that. Or humid Yankee Stadium, maybe we
Humid.
call it that. Some great stuff there. Obviously, when you're looking at some of these projections, you'll see them on the player profiles here at fantasypros.com. So make sure you head over there. Joe's done some amazing work too to bring us these names today. And of course, if you're watching on demand on our YouTube channel, who are the players that you're possibly fading in 2025? I want you to drop those names below. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're trying to get to 25,000 before opening day. We can do it. I believe in us. And for those people who are saying, hey, how do I hang out and watch you guys interact just like everybody in the chat today? Well, you can do that over at twitch.tv/fantasypros. So go head over there because that's where leading off is going to be. And don't forget, Wednesday, March 12th, it's all going down, baby. We're going to be here on our YouTube channel doing the Fantasy Fest yet again, 4 hours of fantasy baseball for you live. Incredible guests, incredible insight. It's your one-stop shop to make sure you get prepared, and maybe you haven't been prepared enough for your drafts. Well, we're going to help you. So get ready with us at the Fantasy Fest. And of course, you can watch it back, but you can join us live 3 p.m. Eastern, March 12th, Wednesday, on our YouTube channel. Subscribe today. That'll do it for us here. But the story of the game goes on. For Joe Orrico, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids. All those projections. Joe, are you tired from looking at data?
That's all I do all year long. Look at data. Whether it's March, it's December, or it's July, I'm always looking at data. I've become an Excel guy. I went and got a journalism degree, and then I became an Excel guy.